Ladies and gentlemen, we've had reports of bad traffic in the city centre area. We may have a slight delay of around 5 minutes. Apologies.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Foundation Day celebrations will begin shortly. May we ask you to please take your seats and ensure that all mobile phones are turned off.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, welcome to you all on our University's Foundation Day, the most prestigious event in our calendar, and I'm delighted that you could join our celebrations. The welcome is also on behalf of our Chancellor, Nazir Afzal, our Pro-Chancellor, Jim Hancock, and members of our Board of Governors. I want to first of all say thank you to our staff, our students, alumni, and partners for all you have contributed to the university this year. Your outstanding efforts, professionalism, and commitment have been integral to delivering our many successes and helping to overcome the obstacles that we have faced. I'm delighted to see our civic guests here, and we also welcome three of our founders, Professor John Garside, Professor Sir Martin Harris, and Dr. Roger Pannoni. It is with great sadness that I have to report that our fourth founder, Professor Tom Hinchcliffe, sadly passed away recently. Tom was frequently at these events. He was Pro-Chancellor and Chair of Council at UMIST from 2001 to 2004, and of course therefore saw in the new University of Manchester in 2004. Our thoughts are with his family. Today we will celebrate the very impressive achievements of our honorary graduates, Catherine Hall, Kevin Leeson and Deborah Gold, who will deliver our Foundation Day lecture and sign our Foundation Declaration. After Deborah's lecture, we'll show a short film that celebrates our long-standing commitment to social responsibility and how we embed it in all that we do. Then we'll move on to the conferment of honorary doctorates by our Chancellor, and by the way, congratulations to you all in advance. But while this is a day of celebration, I think it is also a time when we should reflect on the many people around the world who are seriously in danger or have suffered losses due to conflict. This, of course, includes, but not exclusively, Ukraine, Israel, and Palestine. And we know that many of our staff and students have been personally affected. We have, of course, called for tolerance and understanding at this very, very difficult time. I would like to highlight just a few of our key developments over the past year, and sorry, time is short, I don't want to keep you from the main proceedings for too long, so I'll just highlight a few of them. We've seen many successes over the last 12 months, despite facing some ongoing, some new and some unexpected challenges. And we do continue to make good progress against the goals outlined in our future, our strategic plan. In June, we were delighted to be awarded the #1 spot in the UK and Europe and second in the world in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings. This fantastic result secures our status as the only university globally to have consistently ranked within the top 10, and it is testament to our ongoing commitment to social responsibility, one of the university's 3 core goals. We also launched our new environmental sustainability strategy to engage our staff and students as part of our journey to zero carbon by 2038, which promises to bring transformative change to our campus and beyond. Recently, we received the national results assessing the quality of our teaching, learning and student experience, another of our core goals. The annual National Student Survey delivered positive results for our courses, for quality of teaching and for our Students' Union, but showed that we still have a lot to do to improve on assessment and feedback and student voice. We will, of course, be acting on that feedback. The latest Teaching Excellence Framework, known as the TEF, evaluated the overall quality of the university as a teaching provider and the student experience and outcomes. We were rated silver overall and gold for student outcomes and silver for student experience. The Gold Award for Student Outcomes is a well-deserved accolade for our hard-working graduates and pays tribute to our colleagues who help prepare students for meaningful careers nationally and across the globe. We continue to be home to groundbreaking research with major government funding secured across key areas including cancer treatment, advanced materials, development studies and artificial intelligence. We were surprised but delighted to hear a new national prize will be awarded for artificial intelligence, and it's going to be called the Turing Prize to mark the significance of the baby, the world's first stored program computer created here in 1948. We welcome the announcement that the UK has rejoined Horizon Europe, the EU's £85 billion science research programme, and this brings exciting opportunities for our researchers. Knowledge exchange and innovation remain a key priority, so we were pleased with another exercise, the KEF. We have a REF, a TEF and a KEF now, the Knowledge Exchange Framework, to see our work on intellectual property and commercialisation, research partnerships and public and community engagement award given the highest possible score in the latest assessment. Our results reflect the breadth of activity across our research, teaching and social responsibility. Our global reputation is of course important, and we've been awarded 6th place in the UK and 8th in Europe by the academic ranking of world universities. We're also delighted that we will be hosting the very prestigious Times Higher Education World Academic Summit in 2024, next year, bringing together leaders in higher education, research, industry and policymaking to debate and discuss solutions to pressing issues facing the world's universities. We've also expanded our commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion, forming partnerships with the Cowrie Scholarship Foundation and the Raheem Sterling Foundation. Together we will offer scholarships to talented Black British students to further equal access across higher education. The university's contribution to our city region received a big boost in February when the newly renovated Manchester Museum opened, welcoming literally tens of thousands of visitors in its first week, queuing all the way down Oxford Road. Its new co-created galleries and interactive shared spaces have been designed to build a greater understanding between cultures and promote the experiences of diverse populations across the world. I do encourage you to visit. Last month, I was honoured to attend a ceremony at the museum, which was really quite emotional, to mark the repatriation of 174 cultural heritage items to the Aboriginal and Indiliaqua community of Australia's Northern Territory, a landmark project that has been 3 years in the making, and of course we were the first museum to return items. We've all faced a cost of living crisis over the past year, and we've provided almost £20 million in additional support to staff and students. Then, of course, we had to come together to face a very significant cyber attack earlier in the year. And we've also faced a UCU marking and assessment boycott. I want to give my sincerest thanks to all the many colleagues and students for their resilience, support and hard work during these times. We now look ahead to our highly anticipated and very exciting bicentenary celebrations in 2024, in what promises to be a very special year for our community. Bicentenary engagement sessions have been held with colleagues to gather ideas, and we launched a new website in June to start the 200-day countdown. And finally, the search for my successor is underway. As you know, I will complete my term as President and Vice-Chancellor at the end of July next year, after 14 years. But I can assure you there will be no loss of momentum until the evening of the 31st of July 2024. I very much look forward to taking the university into its 200th year as we continue to build on our success to date. Together, this amazing university will adapt, will respond, and will evolve as we face an ever-changing world that is always bringing us fresh challenges, but also so many opportunities. Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to invite Deborah to deliver the 2023 Foundation Lecture, entitled HIV Has Changed, Tell Everyone, followed by an opportunity to ask questions. Deborah is Chief Executive of the National AIDS Trust, the UK's HIV rights charity, working to stop HIV from standing in the way of health, dignity and equality, and to end new HIV transmissions. Previously, Deborah was Chief Executive of Gallup, the LGBT+ anti-abuse charity, and has worked on issues including homelessness and prisoner rights. Deborah, we are delighted you've accepted our invitation to deliver this lecture. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you so much, Nancy, for that introduction and for the invitation to deliver this lecture. It's an incredible honour. Would you be surprised if I told you that there's a real possibility that England could be the first country in the world to end new transmissions of HIV? What if I told you that if we do everything we need to, we could hit that target by 2030? Today, I'm going to talk to you about why that's true and what stands in the way of us getting there. Matthew Hodson, the long-time HIV activist and Chief Executive of HIV Information Service NAM AIDS-MAP, has a slogan he often uses: HIV has changed, tell everyone. That's what I'm going to do here today, and I hope that in the days and weeks to come, you may do so also. I'm going to start at the beginning of my story with HIV, but in the middle of the HIV epidemic. In summer 1997, I was 21 years old, and I had the experience that many of my friends and community members had had over and over again, watching a friend die of AIDS. Here's Simon Kennett. He died in the AIDS ward at the Royal Free Hospital in London. I joined his partner, his family, and his many friends, holding vigil in the hospital over days and nights as he painfully said his individual goodbyes to each of us. I was lucky that this was a one-off experience for me. For most of Simon's friends, his death was another hospital vigil, another funeral to organise, another loss to mourn among countless others that make up the generation lost to this disease. 1997 was a turning point for me, but also for the HIV epidemic. Just a couple of years before, the discovery was announced of the first genuinely effective medication for HIV, antiretroviral therapy, or ART. I know of no better way of demonstrating the impact of ART than by sharing with you the famous front page of the San Francisco Bay Area Reporter from the 13th of August, 1998. The headline reads, "No obits," and the story starts, "Readers of the Bay Area Reporter who regularly scan the obituary page for familiar faces, friends, ex-lovers, former tricks, that guy you used to see at the gym who's not been around for a while, will have to forgo that ritual this week. No obituaries filed in this paper for this issue, a first since the AIDS epidemic exploded in San Francisco's gay community. It seems a new reality may be taking hold, and the community may be on the verge of a new era of the epidemic. Perhaps." The years before saw enormous progress in HIV, identifying the virus, finding a test for HIV, developing the first drugs, and developing the health promotion messages that allowed people to make choices in their lives until ultimately ART itself was developed. Around 2 decades after the discovery of ART, in 2014, I was incredibly lucky to be appointed Chief Executive of the National AIDS Trust, the UK's HIV rights charity, giving me the chance to work on an issue that means so much to me personally. In my first few years at NAT, we heard rumours and we saw anecdotal evidence. And then in 2017, I saw for the first time 2 trend lines that we never thought we'd see and which I'd now recognise anywhere for the hope and the excitement that they engendered. Here's the first chart. It shows that in England, in 2016, for the first time since the epidemic began, fewer gay and bisexual men were diagnosed with HIV than the previous year, over a fifth fewer than in 2015. And even more dramatically, this chart shows that in London in 2016, nearly a third fewer gay and bisexual men were diagnosed with HIV than the previous year. And with the confirmation that the number of HIV tests increased dramatically that year, we had certainty that the actual number of HIV transmissions were falling. These trend lines are a powerful visual reminder of what was starting to be seen in HIV. We found a recipe that works. So I'm going to tell you what the recipe is. It's driven by one foundational fact and 3 key factors that act as a virtuous circle, reinforcing each other and in turn reducing how long people are able to pass HIV on and how many people are able to acquire HIV. So first, the foundational fact. It began with a new understanding of how HIV transmission works. When first mooted in 2008, the fact was received with incredulity and controversy. The idea was that someone living with HIV who is on successful antiretroviral treatment with an undetectable viral load cannot pass HIV on through sexual contact. In the years since, the evidence to support the claims built in strength until, with the publication of 2 groundbreaking trials, Partner 1 and Partner 2, it became incontrovertible. In Partner 1, in 58,500 instances of sex between 0 different heterosexual couples where one was living with HIV and with an undetectable viral load, there were 0 HIV transmissions. In Partner 2, I'm behind on the slides. There we are. In Partner 2, in 77,000 instances of sex between 0 different gay couples where one was living with HIV and with an undetectable level of virus, there were 0 HIV transmissions. In the words of Alison Roger, the principal investigator on the partner studies, it revealed a precise rate of within-couple transmission of 0. The positive impact of this knowledge is indescribable. Literally, the vast majority of people living with HIV can't pass it on. The power of this knowledge affects everything, lifting a generation of fear and shame from human relationships and acting as a powerful incentive to start and remain on HIV treatment. It launched a worldwide campaign known as U=U, or undetectable equals untransmissible. And with the U=U knowledge, it follows that the sooner people diagnosed with HIV become undetectable, the less transmissible virus exists. And so, speed of treatment becomes stage 1 in our virtuous circle. Before 2015, clinical guidance was that people diagnosed with HIV didn't need to begin treatment until their infection had reached a certain level of progression. But with the knowledge of U=U, a new policy known as treatment as prevention, or TASP, was introduced. And this enabled people to be prescribed HIV antiretrovirals immediately upon diagnosis for the purpose of preventing onward transmission. And TASP was a challenging policy. Many people living with HIV had lived through the years before ART and had experienced the punishing side effects of early HIV medication. And little was known about its long-term effects. And yet the TASP policy encouraged people to take medication they didn't need personally to prevent them passing HIV on. Despite this, many people welcomed the opportunity to start early treatment. But what really changed things was the result of the START trial in 2015. The results of this major trial showed conclusively that beginning treatment immediately leads to better health outcomes for people living with HIV. The data showed that those starting treatment immediately had over a 50% reduction in the risk of developing serious illness or death and a 70% reduction of developing an AIDS-defining illness. And so, With this knowledge, benefit to individuals living with HIV and benefit to the wider community converged, and the policy in the UK and around the world focused on treating people living with HIV immediately upon diagnosis, improving their health outcomes and reducing the number of people living with transmissible levels of virus. And so the next stage on the circle is PrEP. PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, is a daily pill that prevents HIV, something that was unimaginable even 15 years ago. Its incredible efficacy was established in 2 randomly controlled trials that were so successful they ended early because it became unethical not to offer PrEP to those people enrolled on the placebo arm. The results of these trials, reported in 2015, both showed an 86% reduction in HIV acquisition in their PrEP arms as compared to the placebo arms. In fact, PrEP is even more effective than that, as the small number of new cases in the PrEP arms were all of people who stopped taking their medication. We now know that if taken properly, PrEP is almost 100% effective in preventing HIV, and it's now available on the NHS to people at elevated risk of acquiring HIV, with over 86,000 people taking it last year. The final stage on the circle is to reduce the amount of time people live with transmissible levels of virus pre-diagnosis and treatment. And that means frequent testing. And here again is a huge success. Testing for HIV has increased exponentially over the last 10 years as technology has developed and availability has increased. In the early days, testing for HIV involved a trip to a sexual health clinic followed by a painful multi-week wait for results. Now, results from an HIV test can be available as soon as 20 minutes after taking the test. Tests can also be taken in outreach sessions in pubs, community centres and churches. They can be ordered online, posted back with results in a few days by text message, or anyone can buy a self-test kit from a pharmacy or online and have the results 20 minutes after testing at home. All that means that over the last few years, or at least until COVID happened, those who know they're at an increased risk of HIV are testing far more frequently. These charts show you the increasing number of HIV tests taken at sexual health services, including where they've posted out kits from 2017. The trend shows how the number of tests have been building. Unsurprisingly, HIV testing decreased in 2020 because of COVID, and the next year, the number of tests taken by gay and bisexual men bounced right back, higher than it had been in 2019. But tests taken by heterosexual men and heterosexual and bisexual women have yet to return anywhere near their pre-COVID levels. And people testing at sexual health clinics are likely to have some idea that they may be at risk of HIV. But what about people who don't realise that HIV may be an issue? That's where opt-out testing in hospital emergency departments plays a crucial role. A little over a year ago, a pilot was launched in 4 cities in England with the highest prevalence of HIV, including, of course, Manchester. Everyone who has a blood test for any reason in an emergency department will also be tested for HIV and viral hepatitis, unless they opt out. In the first year of testing, hundreds of people have been diagnosed with HIV, alongside others who'd been previously diagnosed but were not in care. This is an extraordinary success, as many of these people would not otherwise be testing for HIV. And this increase in testing means that the time period during which people may be able to unknowingly pass on HIV has reduced. So there we have it, the recipe to end HIV by 2030. Fewer people living with HIV able to pass it on once diagnosed because of early treatment. Fewer people living without HIV able to acquire it because of PrEP. And an ever-reducing time period between HIV acquisition and diagnosis due to frequent testing. Easy, right? Stretching my recipe metaphor to its very limit. It's one thing to have a recipe, but you also need to buy the ingredients and bake the cake. And in HIV and public health more widely, sometimes the ingredients aren't available or are off and the oven has no fuel. To a greater or lesser degree since the beginning of the HIV pandemic, inequality, stigma, misinformation, and disinvestment in and deprioritisation of public health have stood in the way of making all the progress possible. Messaging around HIV can be tricky. It's true that anyone can get HIV. It's also true that particular groups of people are more likely to get it. Each year in the UK, around a quarter of those newly diagnosed with HIV don't fit neatly into a key population at greater risk of acquiring HIV. The other 3/4 do. In the UK, those key populations are largely, though not exclusively, gay and bisexual men and heterosexual Black African women and men. This link in the public consciousness of HIV with, firstly, gay and bi men, and then eventually also people who live in Africa or are part of the African diaspora, means that fear of acquiring an initially terrifying, deadly, and little understood infection became inextricably woven into the existing high levels of homophobia and racism to build the HIV stigma that continues to act as a barrier to this day. In the UK, early responses to HIV information were mixed. The famous Don't Die of Ignorance campaign was a genuinely groundbreaking public health campaign, so ubiquitous that it remains seared in our collective memories. Its mention of anal sex, advice on condoms and lube, acknowledgement that teenagers may have sex, and harm reduction advice for people who inject drugs stood in stark contrast to the US government, in which President Reagan famously didn't mention AIDS in public until 1985. So the Don't Die of Ignorance campaign was brave and hugely important. It was also terrifying. So terrifying, with its images of tombstones and its talk of death, that it amplified the idea of HIV that exists to this day and is almost impossible to shift, that HIV is the very worst thing that can happen to someone, the ultimate bogeyman. And if AIDS and HIV are the ultimate bogeymen, what does that make people living with one or both? The Tombstones campaign was part of an environment in which sensationalist and stigmatising headlines such as these proliferated. Highly effective HIV medication has existed since 1995. Studies now show that people living with HIV, diagnosed in good time, with swift access to HIV medication, will live as long as anyone else. Yet despite this, the environment has been almost impossible to completely shift. This stigma affects every stage of HIV. It prevents people from even considering that they may be at risk of HIV. It prevents people from testing for HIV. It can impact people's ability to adhere to their treatment. It can lead directly to abuse from partners and family members and to discrimination in all walks of life. In the last few years at the National AIDS Trust, we've advised people fired from their jobs, refused access to services, treated poorly in healthcare settings, and so much more. The link between HIV and homophobia is always bubbling right under the surface. It was baked decades into an idea of HIV that it's the fault of the people who acquire it, that they are somehow deserving of it, or certainly less deserving of healthcare than other blameless victims. And there's no better example of that than the horrendous response to PrEP less than 10 years ago. Can you even imagine how much of a big deal PrEP was in the early 2010s when it was discovered? We've used the phrase groundbreaking so much in relation to PrEP that it's almost lost its meaning. Our friends at Prepster, community activists who educate and activate for PrEP, put it best in these early days. There's a pill that can prevent HIV. Don't you think it should be available? Surprisingly, the answer for many turned out to be no. Finally gaining access involved National AIDS Trust fighting and winning a judicial review against the NHS, and then having to fight and win an avoidable appeal. These are all stories published in response to the court case, which simply established that PrEP should be treated like every other medication, judged on the merits of its efficacy and cost-effectiveness in comparison to other new drugs. The nature of the headlines and the press questions at the time makes their motivation fairly obvious. And as I said earlier, messaging around HIV can be tricky. Many, maybe even most people living with HIV in the UK are free from symptoms or side effects, can't pass HIV on, expect to live as long as anyone else, and don't rate HIV in even the top 20 things that matter most about them. However, many other people living with HIV have a very different experience. Some people still live with the painful and debilitating side effects of early toxic medication, or those who have been diagnosed late may experience a range of comorbidities. They are more likely to struggle with mental health difficulties and more likely to be living in poverty without enough money to pay for essentials. Those with insecure immigration status may struggle to access wider healthcare, though HIV treatment itself is free for everyone. People living with HIV are more likely to experience domestic abuse. And these various challenges mean that maintaining daily medication regime and contact with the HIV specialist can prove for some impossible. And that can prove catastrophic for their own health, as well as meaning that they're able to pass HIV on to others. And recently available data shows there may be around 13,000 people for whom for these and other reasons are not taking their medication. That's nearly 3 times as many people as there are estimated to be living with undiagnosed HIV. And despite evidence of the scale of the problem and knowledge of how to relink people to care, the funding and political impetus is not in place to make that happen. And this lack of funding and prioritisation goes beyond those who are out of care and affects other programmes that, while ultimately cost-saving, simply cannot seem to attract funding. While the number of people accessing PrEP is phenomenal, almost all of those are gay and bi men. There are many others who could also benefit, but the data on this slide helps to demonstrate the extent to which this is not happening. Looking at all those who attended a sexual health clinic last year, you can see that far fewer heterosexual men and women had their PrEP need identified, but even of those smaller numbers, very small proportions of heterosexual men and women had their need for PrEP met. Another example is opt-out testing. The evidence to roll it out across the country is overwhelming. It's identifying people previously undiagnosed, but it's also helping to identify people who've fallen out of care. In both cases, these are disproportionately Black African women who otherwise do least well in this system, with the highest level of HIV per capita after gay and bisexual men, the highest level of late diagnosis and of disengagement from care, but the lowest levels of testing and PrEP. And despite this, and the modelling that shows that it will ultimately save the system money, a decision by the government on expanding opt-out testing has been delayed and delayed. And there are, of course, many reasons for this. But one of the most significant is the breakdown of structures in public health, destroying the logic of health economics that should drive investment in prevention and causing untold damage to the fight against HIV. In 2012, following the famous promise of no more top-down rearrangements of the NHS, the Lansley reforms were passed in the Health and Social Care Act. Those reforms took public health responsibility from the NHS and placed it with local authorities. That meant that clinical services, including prevention and diagnosis of HIV and diagnosis and treatment of sexually transmitted infections, are now commissioned by local authorities, funded from central government through the public health grant. And while the NHS has seen real terms funding increases over the past decade, the public health grant has lost over a quarter of its value since 2015. And while visits to sexual health services have grown by more than 35% since 2013. And the fragmentation of services means that the logic of investment in prevention in public health no longer makes sense. For non-public health conditions, the logic works fine, and that's why you see the NHS investing in cancer prevention to prevent additional expenditure down the line in cancer care. But for HIV, investment in prevention usually falls to local authorities, whereas the savings down the line in treatment are felt by the NHS. And that fragmentation can lead directly to the situation that ended up with the PrEP court case and feeds into the barriers that prevent investment in expanding access to PrEP, finding and supporting those lost to care, and expanding opt-out testing in hospital emergency departments. And of course, alongside the challenges within the UK to meeting the 2030 goals is the fact that HIV is a pandemic, and real progress against pandemics can only ever be made internationally. I don't have enough time to properly tackle this, but I will say that the government's dramatic reductions in support for crucial and life-saving international programmes, such as UNAIDS and the Global Fund to fight HIV, TB and malaria, are enormously damaging and demonstrate short-sighted thinking that will eventually impact the direction of our own epidemic. So, I've covered the opportunity there is for England taking advantage of the HIV virtuous circle to be the first country to reach the goal of ending new transmissions of HIV by 2030. I've also discovered some of the structural barriers that stand in the way of realising this opportunity. I want to finish by telling you why, despite this, I'm filled with hope and confidence that we will hit this goal. It's because for HIV, this is nothing new. Every single significant victory in HIV has come as a result of activism led by people living with HIV. From the early days, where services and medication didn't exist, when activists built community support networks, became treatment experts, protested pharmaceutical companies and government regulators to speed up access to potentially life-saving medication, and pioneered health promotion activities. Those activists, alongside clinicians that dedicated their life to this work, and in doing so redefined what shared power can mean between patients and their doctors. Academics like those at this university who added knowledge and perspective to a growing field, public servants working across local and national government, and voluntary sector organisations built a powerful and unbreakable partnership that leads the way still. It's been there time and time again. It has never let us fail, and so it won't let us this time, because HIV has changed. So please, tell everyone.
Thank you, Deborah, for a fascinating and illuminating lecture and such an amazing story of how medical breakthroughs often only work when they're accompanied by social change and policy change. Happens so often. Deborah's kindly agreed to answer a few questions. I think we've got down here. Is that Alan? I've got a bright light in my eye. Alan.
Deborah, Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. Thank you very much for the work that you have done, and that amazing lecture. I wonder if you had a word of advice for an organisation such as the University of Manchester, which has such strong social responsibility conscience, and give some advice as to what we could do to help in this fight, because from what you've said, it seems very achievable to hit the 2030 target. And I think many people here would very much like to help.
Yeah, great question. I mean, universities have such incredible power inside cities to bring together different communities. And so I think there's all kinds of different things that you can do, from your students and your staff being involved in supporting organisations like National AIDS Trust, Terence Higgins Trust, also incredible organisations you have based in Manchester like George House Trust, the LGBT Foundation, that are doing work in this area, and to support the kind of campaigning and influencing work that we're doing and add your voices. I mean, honestly, the simplest thing that literally anyone can do is understand the way HIV has changed and talk to people about it, because getting that information out there is incredibly important. And World AIDS Day is coming up on the 1st of December. It's a brilliant opportunity to spread the word. But then also, I mean, universities have incredible opportunities through their research to really focus on really help invest and focus on the learning in this area. And everything I've just mentioned, you know, the PrEP trials were done by universities, the early testing of opt-out testing was done by universities, and now I think we're at a stage in HIV where there will be technological, you know, kind of improvements. Already we have kind of coming down the pipeline injectable antiretroviral treatments and PrEP. There's all kinds of exciting innovation. But a lot of the research is about implementation. How do we kind of get to the right people? And I think especially in cities like Manchester, which are incredibly multicultural, there's really opportunities to look at those communities who are being left behind and what we need to do differently. And I'd love to see universities like Manchester kind of leading the way in that, definitely.
Thank you. I've got a question right over on the left.
Thank you, Deborah, for the work that you do. I'm Monica Pearl. I am senior lecturer in American literature and film here at the university. I'm also a veteran of ACT UP New York, and I was gratified to hear you mention the activism that was so instrumental in making all of this possible. I was sort of waiting for you to say it, and was so delighted that you did. I wonder if you could say more about not just how activism has worked historically, Prepster you mentioned as an activist organization, but how activism is still necessary to make this dream come true.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your work in ACT UP New York. You guys kind of led the way for the world. But the story of HIV, you can't disaggregate it from the story of activism. And I think that's what I was trying to say at the end, that I think that HIV as a medical condition is really unique in the way in which people affected, either because they were living with HIV or kind of part of the communities affected, absolutely have driven from the beginning all of the responses. And in doing that, created these really unique partnerships with clinicians and with academics that I don't think you see in other medical conditions. And that is still very much the case now. So, I mean, even in terms of all this, stuff you see about patient involvement in the NHS, and I think, we've been doing that for 40 years. Like, it would be outrageous for us in HIV to have a meeting that didn't have people living with HIV kind of leading those conversations and kind of bringing their own expertise about their own experience. So PrEP's as an example, but there are organisations all around the country who, by sharing their personal stories, but also by becoming experts in their own HIV, are able to kind of drive the work and the direction that the work goes in. So it's absolutely still true.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've just got time for one more question, if we have another one. Yes, thank you. Richard.
Hello, Deborah. Thanks very much for that. I'm Richard Screet, and I'm Deputy Director for Alumni Engagement at the university. I think there's a UN Sustainable Development Goal around the eradication of HIV transmission, and I think there's a deadline, a similar one, of around 2030, and that seems incredibly challenging. How realistic is that kind of achievement, given what you know about the challenge within the UK?
Yeah, so yes, the reason that the UK has this 2030 goal is because we're signed up to the UN Sustainable Development Goal of ending the HIV epidemic by 2030. So you're absolutely right, that's what it stems for, and that's driving the kind of UK's response. So first of all, you have to accept that HIV is a pandemic. And I didn't really get into kind of talking about the international issues, and one thing that I didn't say is that one of the reasons that the UK is as far ahead, further ahead than other places in the world, is because we're one of a small number of places where HIV treatment, right through from HIV testing to the medication, is free for absolutely everybody, regardless of immigration status. So it's different from the rest of the health system, and you can really see the difference that makes, because absolutely core is access to treatment, both in terms of the individual and in terms of ending the epidemic. And so in other places where treatment access is more challenging, then progress is slower. So hitting the 2030 goal means, for us, ending transmissions of HIV taking place inside the UK rather than all new cases of HIV, because people will travel. It's an international world. How realistic is it? Maybe I have a different answer now than I might have had even 3 weeks ago. I do think it's possible. I don't think we're doing everything we need to. The latest data that came out literally a week or so ago showed that for the first time since 2015, there's an increase in the number of new cases of HIV, and that's because of our failure to really meet the needs of Black African women, and I think that's the new challenge, and also ethnic minority gay men who are not getting access to testing and treatment in the same way as other people, and so there's some more targeted work to do there. So I am genuinely hopeful. I wouldn't say I'm confident, but I think it could be possible. And it's inexcusable to not do it when it is possible.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I thank Deborah again for an amazing lecture? Thank you for your questions. We're now going to play a short film that I referred to earlier on social responsibility, and you'll hear from our wonderful student choir, Ad Solon Chamber Choir, with the head of music, our own Professor James Garrett, on the organ. Hi, James. And we will, as they say, be back shortly. Thank you all.
For 200 years, our university has been making a difference in Manchester and beyond. Social responsibility is in our DNA. We lead the way in UK higher education in having social responsibility as a core strategic goal. It underpins everything we do, from creating international research partnerships to opportunities for local students and creating a more environmentally sustainable campus. The quality and scale of our social and environmental impact is unmatched. This film is a celebration of all our people, our colleagues, our students, our partners, doing what they do best, working together to break down barriers, solve global challenges, and build a fairer, greener, and healthier world.
Having a Manchester Museum representing every person who lives in this city is important. Having this Asian element in there is, of course, my roots. I want to know about my roots. I came here as a child. Now I have my own children. I want them to know my roots as well. The museum is not all about the past, it's also about present and the future.
The university's environmental sustainability strategy is called Our Sustainable Future, and really it's a blueprint for everything that we want to achieve environmentally over the next 5 years. The thing that makes our sustainability strategy special is its real loyalty and adherence to the science. Our core target is zero carbon by 2038, because we know that only by almost completely eliminating our carbon emissions is the way to guarantee the kind of future that we all want to live in. We're committed to creating a truly sustainable campus. That's what we need to deliver.
The Manchester Access Programme is a local programme for Year 12 students. It gives you the skills and almost a university-like induction and how to cater your application to Russell Group and research-driven universities like Manchester. Overall, I'd say it was really enriching and exciting because it gave you the prospect of a university that you didn't have before.
We have a wonderful partnership with the University of Manchester in cancer area, specifically in esophageal cancer, which is the third leading cause of cancers in Kenya. We will benefit immensely by having our doctors trained at the University of Manchester. Also from telemedicine, real-time answers to some of the questions we see here in Kenya.
Graphene Innovations Manchester, we develop graphene-based product to solve global problems. With the help of university, we commercialize these products. One of the key products we developed in the company is called Gym Concrete. We do not use any cement, no water, and can be cured within an hour. By adding a tiny amount of graphene, you can push back its properties. So it's solving a lot of housing problems around the world in a sustainable way.
Social responsibility for me is about embedding that thought of what can we do for the good of society into every decision we make.
I think being a MAP student carries over for the whole 3 years that you're at university, and everyone's quite mindful that you've had to work really hard to get to this point.
You can think globally, but you have to act locally. You can bring people together and then to celebrate the richness and diversity that we have.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel. University of Manchester has already done it, and it is coming to lead us.
The University of Manchester is the best place on earth for education, innovation, and commercialization, rapid commercialization to solve real global problems.
We have so many things to be proud of, but there's still more to do. The challenges facing the world are greater than ever, but together we can find a way to change lives for the better.
Ladies and gentlemen, the honorary degree ceremony will begin shortly. May we ask you to please be upstanding.
Thank you. Please be seated. Distinguished guests, I would like to begin by echoing the President and Vice-Chancellor's welcome to you all at this most prestigious of occasions, our Foundation Day celebrations, an integral part of which is, of course, this honorary degree ceremony. I'd also like to say how much I enjoyed Deborah's foundation lecture, or maybe enjoyed is not the right word, I don't know, and how proud I am of this university, both its history and current work, some of which was highlighted in the film that you have just seen. I'm also very excited to see what the future holds for this great institution and what part I can play in it. I've been Chancellor now for 15 months, 2 weeks, and a day. Who's counting? And it has been an absolute privilege to have that role, as I now have for the next 5 years, 9 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. And in that time, in the short time that I've been in this role, it's been an absolute honor to walk into rooms with world experts on teaching, on research, on social responsibility, and pretend I know what they're talking about. I've also had the privilege of presiding over 18 graduation ceremonies this summer, and to see the pride of the families and supporters, to see this cohort who've been through the pandemic that we've all been through and come out successful has been a real source of joy for everybody that was in that room. It is a phenomenal achievement that this university continues to flourish as it does. And you've already heard what its position is worldwide, but 44,000 students, 13,000 staff, 25 Nobel Prizes, more than 500,000 alumni speak to testify to what this university has done and what this university will continue to do. So it is with great pleasure that I now perform one of my official duties as Chancellor, which is to honour 3 distinguished individuals with the conferment of honorary doctorates. Each of them has, in their diverse fields, contributed hugely to the good of society, and their achievements have had a positive impact way beyond their most immediate spheres of influence. As a recipient myself, I can appreciate their significance, being the highest honour that this university can confer. And in conferring the honour, the university is not just recognising these distinguished individuals, it is also saying something about itself. A university is shaped and defined by the calibre, qualities, values, and achievements of those who choose and whom it chooses to join its community, whether as honorary doctorates or graduates, alumni, students, researchers, teachers, or the many support staff that we have who help facilitate academic excellence in so many ways. The university is therefore being enhanced by the honour that Deborah Gold, Catherine Hall, and Kevin Leeson are conferring on us. In other words, we are honoured by honouring them. In just a moment, the Registrar, Secretary, and Chief Operating Officer, I always say that, it's only one person, he has 3 jobs, will escort the first of our honorary graduates, Miss Deborah Gold, onto the platform where Professor Graham Lord will present her. Emerita Professor Catherine Hall will then be escorted onto the platform, and Professor Stuart Jones will present her. Finally, Sir Kevin Leeson will then be escorted, and Professor Martin Schroeder will present him. And before the ceremony ends, Sir Kevin Leeson will address the congregation on behalf of all of our graduates. So it is with real pleasure that I now invite the Registrar, the Secretary, and the Chief Operating Officer to escort the first of our honorary graduates, Deborah Gold, onto the platform for the conferment of her honorary degree of Doctor of Social Sciences honoris causa. Thank you.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, Deborah Gold is clearly an exceptional individual whose work has undoubtedly saved lives and inspired many more. As CEO of the National AIDS Trust, she works to improve both clinical treatment and national policy as it relates to HIV and AIDS, as you heard in a fabulous lecture. She's worked in the social sector for over 2 decades, campaigning to ensure the continuation of funds for national HIV prevention and ensuring preventative treatments are available for the people of Greater Manchester and beyond. She was voted one of the most inspiring LGBTQ people of 2016 by BuzzFeed, and her recent work in the past few years has had a fundamental impact on Manchester's LGBTQ community and other groups at increased risk of contacting HIV. In Greater Manchester, HIV has always been a significant health issue, as you mentioned in your lecture. We have one of the highest averages of people living with HIV in some of our boroughs, and more than 5,600 overall living with HIV within Greater Manchester. In 2016, Debbie challenged the NHS through the courts, ultimately going to the Court of Appeal for a judicial review to have pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP as we call it, made available to at-risk groups outside of London, with Manchester being a primary beneficiary. And as you've heard, this allows HIV-negative people to access and take the antiretroviral drug to avoid getting HIV in the first place. Multiple studies around the world, as Debbie mentioned, has shown PrEP to be highly effective in reducing the risk of contracting HIV. Just over 250 new HIV diagnoses are made every year in Greater Manchester. The rate of new infections from 2017 to 2018 fell by over 12%, and this reduction can in part be attributed to PrEP availability. Debbie continues to lobby central government, the NHS and NICE to increase the availability of PrEP to even more people, following the demonstrable scientific evidence from the existing trials. Extraordinary data, extraordinary data. Debbie is a regular contributor for the BBC and Sky News, amongst others. And in July 2018, the battle for PrEP was the topic of BBC Two documentary, The People versus the NHS, Who Gets the Drugs, in which Debbie featured. In 2019, she was invited to join the National HIV Commission, which aims to develop evidence-based recommendations to end HIV transmissions and HIV-attributed deaths in England within the next decade. In addition to her work with the National AIDS Trust, while CEO at Gallup, Debbie supported individuals to challenge historical convictions that remained on CRB DBS checks, despite no longer being a criminal offence. Debbie's work helped these individuals to have their convictions expunged, and consequently the law has now been changed to exonerate all of those affected. Chancellor, I'm very pleased to present to you Deborah Gold for the degree of Doctor of Social Sciences, honoris causa.
And by virtue of the authority vested in me by the university, and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Social Sciences, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, Professor Catherine Hall has made a succession of innovative contributions to the understanding of modern British history and imperial history over many decades, and has been consistently in the intellectual vanguard of the discipline. Brought up in Leeds and educated at Sussex and Birmingham universities, she came of age politically at Birmingham, where, as a young mother, she became active in the feminist movement. She took part in the first Women's Liberation Conference at Ruskin College in 1970. Her political commitments have always informed her historical work. In the 1980s, she established herself as a leading figure in the feminist rethinking of history, notably in her co-authored book, Family Fortunes, which is now something of a classic. She taught at North East London Polytechnic, later the University of East London, and at Essex, before moving to a chair at UCL in 1998. Much of her work has been concerned with the intersections of class, gender, and race in modern Britain, in books such as White, Male, and Middle Class, and Defining the Victorian Nation. Over time, her focus shifted to the impact of British colonialism, especially on Britain itself. Her two major projects at UCL on British slave ownership and its legacy have decisively shifted the terms of public debate on the place of empire and slavery in the making of modern Britain. They offer an exemplary model of the capacity of academic history to change the public consciousness. The importance and quality of her work has been recognised, notably by the award of the British Academy's Leverhulme Medal and Prize for 2021. Chancellor, I'm very pleased to present to you Catherine Hall for the degree of Doctor of Letters, honoris causa.
And Catherine, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the university, and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Letters, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, Sir Kevin Leeson graduated from the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology with a first-class degree in electrical and electronic engineering. While here at the university, he was on an RAF cadetship and was a member of Manchester University Air Squadron. His early RAF appointments saw him responsible for the first-line servicing of Hercules and Tornado aircraft. Over a long and very distinguished career, he has made outstanding contributions to the prestige and capability of UK aerospace, driving strategy and procurement across the RAF. This culminated in his promotion to Air Marshal and joining the Air Force Board as Chief Engineer of the RAF. As the most senior engineer in the Royal Air Force, he led the MOD Air Procurement Organisation from 2009 to 2012 and was responsible for £3 billion of annual spend on development, acquisition and support of air systems. He led the Typhoon fighter and the A400M transport aircraft, which I must admit I had never heard of before, during some of the most challenging phases, ensuring that these programs succeeded in the defence of the UK and achieved export success. He also reformed the MOD Air Safety Organisation after a highly critical report in 2009, thus ensuring UK defence recovered its reputation as a leader in air safety. Sir Kevin was elected Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2012 and appointed Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath in 2012 New Honours List. Throughout his distinguished career over 30 years, Sir Kevin has been very active in numerous charitable endeavours, commitments that he has delivered with enthusiasm and great success. Most notably, he was chair of the RAF Charitable Trust, which is the charity that stages the Royal International Air Tattoo. Here he led and sponsored highly successful programs in STEM subjects, stimulating many thousands of young people to engage with engineering and particularly aerospace, and providing educational funding for the disadvantaged. As president and subsequently vice patron of the Armed Forces Winter Sports Association, he delivered winter sports competition opportunities for aspiring national standard athletes. His success for these charities was underpinned by his professional success, where he spoke with authority in support of his charity and mentoring work. Chancellor, I'm delighted to present to you Sir Kevin Leeson for the degree of Doctor of Engineering, honoris causa.
Sir Kevin, by virtue of the authority vested in me by this university, and with great personal pleasure, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Engineering, honoris causa. I'd like to invite Dr. Leeson to say a few words on behalf of all of the honorary graduates.
Chancellor and honoured guests, it is my great privilege to reply on behalf of my fellow honorary graduates and to say how honoured we are to be part of this wonderful occasion. It makes all three of us immensely proud that the university has chosen to recognise their activities in this very special way. Each of us, of course, as you've heard, have had very different careers, and we thank the university for recognising such diverse areas of interest. Professor Hall has been privileged to speak at the university several times, developing a close relationship with you, and is greatly honoured by your recognition of her work. Catherine has valued, as you heard, the role of the university in fostering the understanding of many facets of British history, born of Manchester's rich industrial, cultural and social heritage. Deborah has had a very close relationship with Manchester. The city has played a key role in the HIV story that she told today to us all. She's been delighted to work closely with the two leading HIV organisations here, along with colleagues from across the clinical, academic, political and voluntary sectors to share learning and shape solutions. Manchester's unique, devolved and integrated health response has led the way for changes that are now taking place in healthcare across the country. For my own part, I am humbled to be sharing a platform with two such distinguished individuals. My own association goes back a little further than does that of my fellow recipients, to my undergraduate years at UMIST, far too many years ago. I well remember cycling past this illustrious building, usually it has to be said in the rain, en route to lectures at the UMIST campus. I also treasure the memories of a joyful day inside this hall and in the grounds, mercifully rather drier, receiving my degree with my fellow students. I could never have dreamed that 46 years on, I would be playing a role in the Foundation Day celebrations. I have fond memories of early academic life and those gallant lecturers who sought to instill in me knowledge, a way of thinking, professional integrity, and most importantly, a determination to improve the world in which we live. Later in all our working lives, the roles we have played continues to interface with academia as we seek to find new learning or approaches to society's challenges. My career in aerospace has featured many friendships made in this university and also with many colleagues from the great aerospace institutions that abound in the northwest of England. It is with great pride that I see how the merger of UMIST and Manchester Engineering has produced engineering departments at the cutting edge of research and academic performance. In my later years, it's also been my great fortune to be at the helm of a charity specialising in giving young people, many from disadvantaged environments, the opportunities to succeed in the fascinating world of aerospace, be that as engineers or learning to fly. For me personally, seeing young people develop the confidence and will to succeed has been as enjoyable as was my journey from UMIST and Manchester University Air Squadron, eventually to the privilege of serving on the board of the Royal Air Force as its chief engineer. So I should conclude with some thank yous. Deborah and Catherine join me in wanting to say how grateful we are to our colleagues, friends and family that have supported us in our endeavours. We would also like to say how immensely proud we are that the university has bestowed on us this significant honour. So Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, founders, we thank the university for the recognition you have given us today.
Doctors Gold, Hall and Leeson, on behalf of the university, I would like to extend the warmest congratulations on your honorary doctorates and to offer each of you our very best wishes for the future. I'll now declare the ceremony closed.